The holding cell was supposed to be silent that night. But when the cameras all went dark at the same exact moment, and a man turned up dead with the word suicide scribbled on the report, Detective Claire Donovan knew it wasn't chance. It was murder, and the man covering it up was her own captain. This is not just a story about corruption inside four walls. It's about veterans abandoned by the system, a little girl the world tried to silence, and a canine left to grow old. In the shadows, it's about a city finally standing up to the men who swore to protect it. Stay with me, because once you hear what happened that night, you'll never see justice the same way again. If you believe these stories deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and join us, because this is only the beginning. From the rooftop bar of the Marriott, the city glittered like a promise. Polished glass towers mirrored the fading sun, and well-dressed couples laughed over martinis. Waiters floated through the haze of jazz music carrying plates of oysters and prime rib. Deals were being made with a handshake and a smile. Fortunes sealed in the soft glow of candlelight. A mile away, under the concrete skeleton of the I-90 overpass, Frank Miller coughed into his sleeve. The cough rattled in his chest like loose change. He pulled the army green blanket tighter around his shoulders and leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. Once he had been Sergeant Frank Miller, U.S. Marines, boots on the ground in a country most of the kids walking past couldn't even find on a map. Now he was just another bum to them, another body on the sidewalk. At his side lay Rex, a German shepherd with graying fur and tired joints. Once, Rex had worn a canine vest, chasing down drug runners and sniffing out hidden caches. Now he twitched in his sleep, growling softly at phantom threats. People hurried past, holding their breath, some muttering, "Damn freeloaders." A man in a business suit spat as he tossed his empty latte cup into the gutter. Frank said nothing. He rubbed Rex's ear and whispered, "Ignore M, boy. They don't know." They didn't know the nights Frank still woke with sand in his throat, the echo of mortar in his ears. They didn't know that Rex had saved 2 officers when a meth house went up in flames. To the city, they were just shadows cluttering the view. 3 blocks south, a girl hunched on the cracked steps outside a pawn shop, a spiral notebook balanced on her knees. Jasmine Carter pressed her pencil to the paper, dark braids falling over her face. She was 12, sharp as glass, stubborn as stone. Her mother cleaned motel rooms 6 nights a week. Her father was gone, lost somewhere between a courthouse and an ice van. She mouthed multiplication tables under the flickering glow of the street lamp. A car rolled by, music booming, and 2 boys in the back shouted, "Yo, what you studying for? You ain't going nowhere." Their laughter trailed off, leaving Jasmine clutching her notebook tighter. A boy her age passed on the sidewalk, blonde hair neatly parted, a plastic bag of McNuggets swinging in his hand. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. His mother's grip tightened. On his wrist, "Keep walking," she hissed. "Don't stare." Jasmine bent over her page again, the numbers blurring. She dug the pencil harder, as if pressure could carve her way out. Inside the gray fortress of the 12th precinct, the night shift droned. Phones rang, fluorescent lights buzzed. On Detective Claire Donovan's monitor, a notice popped up. Subject deceased in holding cell. Ortiz, Daniel, 32. Cause of death, suicide by hanging. No foul play suspected. Claire leaned back in her chair. Suicide? Daniel Ortiz had been booked for shoplifting a pack of razors and a 6-pack of beer. Poor, unemployed, Latino. He hadn't even seen a lawyer yet. Now he was dead. She pulled up the surveillance log. Every single camera covering the holding block had gone dark for 15 minutes, exactly the window of his supposed suicide. And the officer of record in charge of the shift? Captain Richard Hayes. Her boss. Claire's jaw tightened. Hayes was a decorated cop, charismatic when he wanted to be, but she'd seen the disdain in his eyes when talking about trash clogging up the cells. Last month, she'd overheard him say, half of them killing themselves would save. U.S. paperwork. She'd laughed weakly then, like everyone else, swallowing her unease. Now, those words scraped against her bones. Frank stirred when a cluster of college kids stumbled under the overpass, drunk on cheap whiskey. One of them spotted his coin tin, half filled with nickels and dimes. The boy kicked it, coins skittering across the concrete. Easy money, huh? Just sit and beg. Frank bent to gather them, fingers trembling from the cold. Rex growled, deep and steady. The boys laughed but backed away, tossing curses into the night. A squad car rolled past, window down. Move along, the officer barked. Can't camp here. Frank raised a hand in a tired salute. The car drove on. Above, the traffic roared. And not half a mile away, Detective Donovan's sedan slowed at the intersection. Her eyes flicked to the side, catching the silhouette of a man curled beneath a bridge, a dog guarding his feet. For a second, her chest tightened. She thought of her father, a Navy vet who died waiting 6 hours in a VA emergency room because the line was too long. She pressed the gas and drove on. That night, Jasmine walked home with her notebook hugged to her chest. The liquor store loomed on the corner, men leaning against its wall. She quickened her steps. "Hey, little schoolgirl," one called. Another whistled. A security guard stepped forward, smirking. He waved his flashlight like a baton. "You can't. Hang here, move it." I live over there," Jasmine stammered. Before he could bark again, a low growl rolled out of the alley. Rex stepped into the light, teeth bared. Frank followed, leaning against the wall. "She's fine," he rasped. "She's with us." The guard sneered but stepped back. "Whatever, get lost." Jasmine stared at the old man and his dog. For the first time all day, someone had stood between her and danger. She whispered, "Thanks." Frank nodded, eyes tired but kind. Rex wagged his tail once. Claire was still awake at 2 a.m., sifting through Ortiz's file at her kitchen table. The city hummed beyond the window, restless, indifferent. She closed her eyes, rubbed her temples. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. He didn't hang himself. Check the west stairwell. 3rd floor. Midnight logbooks don't lie. Her. Pulse hammered. She typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. She rose and crossed to the window. From 20 floors up, the skyline glittered, but her gaze drifted lower to the streets where Frank Miller curled under a bridge, where Jasmine Carter wrote in the dark, where families like Daniel Ortiz's would bury another son no one cared about. The city looked beautiful from here. But beauty was a liar. Claire turned back to the file. The words of the text burned in her mind. She whispered, "All right. Let's see how deep this goes." Sleep rarely came easy for Frank. That night, curled under the overpass with Rex pressed close, his eyes fluttered shut and he was back in the jungle. Not the desert, not the dust of Iraq like the young men now. His war had been humid, choking with vines, the smell of wet soil and blood. He was 23 again, hearing the hump of mortar, his buddy screaming for a medic. He remembered dragging Corporal Jameson, bullets snapping past like angry hornets. He remembered the river crossing, the mud sucking at his boots, the chopper finally lifting them out while tracers carved the night sky. When he jolted awake, breath ragged, it was Rex who steadied him, warm body against his side, steady heartbeat. Under grizzled fur, he rubbed the dog's neck. "Guess we're both leftovers now, huh?" he muttered. Rex thumped his tail once, as if to agree. Frank stared up at the concrete ceiling of the overpass. The city roared above, indifferent. He whispered to the dark, "They never see us." Not really. A few blocks away, Jasmine couldn't sleep either. She lay on the thin mattress in the one-bedroom apartment she shared with her mom and 2 younger brothers. The TV from the neighbors blared through the wall. Her brothers snored. She closed her eyes and remembered a night 2 years ago. Sirens, a pounding on the door. Men in dark uniforms shouting, her mother crying. She had peeked from the bedroom to see her father on the floor, hands cuffed behind. "Him, please," her mother begged. "He's got papers." One of the officers laughed. "Not the right ones." They dragged him out. Jasmine had chased to the door, calling, "Daddy." He'd looked back once, eyes full of fear and apology, before the van swallowed him. She hadn't seen him since. Now whenever she saw flashing lights, her stomach knotted. And still, teachers at school asked why her homework was late, why she didn't focus. They never asked why she was tired, or why she carried that notebook everywhere like a lifeline. She pressed it to her chest now, whispering, "I'll make you proud, Daddy, somehow." The next morning, Claire Donovan sat at her desk with a coffee. Gone cold, she opened the digital log again. At first glance it was clean, technical malfunction. But she dug deeper, cross-referencing timestamps. At 11:59 p.m., 1 minute before the blackout, the lobby camera still worked. She froze. The frame. A tall, broad-shouldered figure walked past, uniform blurred by motion. A second later, the file glitched. She printed the still. The face wasn't visible, but the outline was familiar, too familiar. Her stomach tightened. "Detective Donovan," a voice snapped. She looked up. Captain Hayes stood in the doorway. Coffee in hand, eyes sharp. "You're in early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, casual. He smirked. "That case file you're on? Open and shut." "Don't waste your time." Her throat tightened. "Understood." When he left, she slipped the printout into her bag. Her pulse thudded. Someone wanted her blind. Someone else wanted her looking. And Hayes was watching. That evening, Claire parked a block from the overpass and walked. She wasn't sure why. Maybe the text, maybe her father's memory, maybe the need to see the city without glass walls in between. Frank was there, sitting against the pillar, Rex's head in his lap. Jasmine perched beside him, notebook open, pencil scratching. The picture stopped Claire in her tracks. The forgotten soldier, the child everyone dismissed, and the old dog guarding them both. She approached slowly. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching. Frank's eyes narrowed, then softened when he saw her badge clipped at her belt. "Detective," he rasped. His voice was gravel and smoke. "I'm not here for trouble," Claire said quickly. "I just wanted to say hello." She looked at Jasmine. "What are you working on?" "Math homework," the girl said shyly. "Fractions." Claire smiled. "I hated fractions." For a moment, the three of them shared a silence that felt strangely solid, as if a bridge was being built from scraps. Claire thought of her father again, of Ortiz's bruised neck, of Hayes's smirk. The city's wounds weren't scattered, they were stitched together, bleeding into each other. She handed Jasmine a granola bar from her pocket. "Keep at it. You're smarter than they want you to believe." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Frank," gave a slight nod. Rex wagged once. That night, Claire returned to her apartment exhausted. She dropped her bag on the counter, poured herself a glass of water, and went to the bathroom. When she came back, the folder lay open on the table. She froze. She hadn't touched it. On top of the papers was a single slip of paper in blocky handwriting. "Trust no one upstairs. They'll bury you like they buried Ortiz." Claire's hands shook. The door was locked. The windows shut. No sign of entry. She looked out at the skyline. From here, the city was dazzling, glittering like a jewel. But she knew better now. She knew the shadows beneath it were darker than anyone wanted to admit. She folded the note, slipped it into her pocket, and whispered, "All right. If you want to fight, let's fight." Under the overpass, Frank lay awake, staring at the graffiti above his head. "Die trash." He traced the letters with a trembling finger, Rex's head heavy on his lap. Across town, Jasmine sat at the window. Notebook open, scribbling words this time instead of numbers. "I won't disappear. I won't." And in her apartment, Claire Donovan sat with the file in front of her, the slip of paper burning in her palm. 3 lives scattered across the same city, bound now by threads of injustice. They didn't know it yet, but soon, their paths would collide, and nothing in the city would look the same again. Detective Claire Donovan never slept well when a case began to itch under her skin. That night, she sat at the small kitchen table, with a mug of cold coffee, staring at the blurred still shot of the tall figure in the stairwell. She wanted to believe it wasn't Hayes. God, she wanted to. She opened a drawer and pulled out an old photograph of her father, Patrick Donovan, in his navy blues, smiling awkwardly at the camera. He'd been her hero growing up. Strong, steady, funny, until the stroke. Until the endless waits at the VA hospital. The hours in plastic chairs under fluorescent lights. Nurses saying, "We're doing our best." He had died in a waiting room, paperwork still clutched in his hand. Claire had been 20, already in the academy. She remembered thinking, if this is how the country treats its veterans, what chance does anyone else have? She rubbed the photo, set it back down, and whispered, "I'll get to the truth, Dad. I won't let them bury it." Frank Miller woke coughing, the cold gnawing his lungs. He pushed himself up, joints creaking, and for a moment he almost reached for a cigarette, before remembering he couldn't afford the luxury anymore. He shuffled to the soup kitchen on Main. The line wound down the block, mothers with strollers, men with hollow eyes, teenagers clutching plastic bags with all their belongings. A volunteer passed him a tray without meeting his eyes. He sat at the end of a long table, Rex under his chair. Conversations buzzed around him. Eviction notices, overdoses, shelters turning people away. A man with tattoos down his neck muttered, "They'd rather see us dead than fed." Frank didn't disagree. He thought about the day he lost his house. The bank notice pinned to the door. His wife gone years before, unable to live with the drinking and the nightmares. His daughter God. He hadn't seen her in almost a decade. He carried her last birthday card in his jacket, the paper soft and worn from folding. He touched it now, whispering, "Maybe one day, kiddo." Rex nudged his hand, eyes steady. In a world that had discarded him, the dog was the only constant. At school, Jasmine Carter kept her head down. She sat in the back row of math class, the only black girl in a sea of pale faces. The teacher, Mrs. Kellerman, didn't bother calling on her anymore. When Jasmine raised her hand, another girl snickered. "Why don't you go back where you came from?" Heat rushed up Jasmine's neck. She wanted to shout, "I was born here, same as you." But she'd learned early talking back meant detention, maybe suspension. And her mom couldn't risk another meeting with the principal. So she swallowed it. She pressed her pencil into her notebook until the leads snapped. At lunch, she sat alone. A group of boys walked past, one mimicking a barking dog. "Careful, she steal your lunch." Another laughed. Jasmine hunched over her tray. But when she glanced at her notebook, she saw the words she'd written the night before. "I won't disappear. I won't." She straightened her shoulders. Just a little. Back at the precinct, Claire felt the walls tightening. Hayes called her into his office. "You're chasing shadows," he said, voice smooth. "Ortiz was a junkie thief. Hung himself. End of story. EA doesn't need more paperwork." Claire held his gaze. "Sir, the cameras. Glitch. It happens. Don't make it more than it is." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We've got real work to do, Donovan. You want to be a hero? Save it for the movies." She walked out, jaw tight. Colleagues glanced at her, then looked away. Already, she could feel the isolation. Hayes had power. People feared him. At her desk, her phone buzzed again. Another blocked text. "You're right to doubt." He wasn't alone in that cell. Ask who signed the log at 11:55. Her hands trembled. She deleted the message. She was in too deep, and whoever was feeding her information knew every move. That evening, Claire walked past the overpass again. Frank was there, Rex stretched beside him. Jasmine sat cross-legged, homework spread out. Claire crouched. "How's the math coming?" "Better," Jasmine said, not quite smiling. Frank studied her, eyes narrowed. "Detective, huh? What's someone like you doing down here?" Claire hesitated, trying to remember what's real. He barked a laugh, bitter. "Out there," he gestured toward the glowing skyline. "That's the real they care about. We're just the mess they don't want to look at." Claire met his gaze. "Maybe, but messes can tell the truth nobody else wants to hear." For a moment, something like respect flickered in Frank's eyes. Rex pressed against her knee, tail thumping once. Jasmine looked between them, curious. She'd never seen a cop talk to Frank like that. She'd never seen one sit on the cold ground without wrinkling their nose. It was small. But it mattered, later. That night, as Claire walked back to her car, she glanced over her shoulder. Frank and Jasmine were laughing softly, Rex nosing Jasmine's hand. For the first time, the girl's smile was wide, unguarded. Claire thought, that dog's the bridge. He doesn't see status, color, failure. He just sees people. And maybe, just maybe, that loyalty was what tied them all together. Her, the soldier discarded by his country, the little girl dismissed by her school, and a dead man whose truth was being buried. The city might not care. Hayes might try to crush it. But Rex's steady gaze reminded her, truth didn't die easy. It began on a Wednesday afternoon, hot and restless. A crowd had gathered outside the courthouse, protesting. The death of Daniel Ortiz, the official story suicide in custody, didn't sit right with anyone who knew him. He'd been broke, sure, but his sisters swore he was no quitter. Placards rose in the air, justice for Ortiz, no more dead in cells. A chant rippled, we see you. We hear you. Frank Miller stood on the edge of the crowd, Rex leaning against his leg. He hadn't planned on being here. He didn't plan much of anything anymore. But something about the noise, the raw anger, pulled him in. He felt the same heat in his chest that he hadn't felt since his younger days, the sense of standing for something bigger than himself. Jasmine had skipped her after-school program and slipped into the crowd. Notebook clutched tight. She was small, almost invisible among the bodies, but her eyes burned. This is what Daddy would want, she told herself. And Claire Donovan? She was there too, plainclothes, watching from the steps. Technically, she wasn't assigned to the protest, but she needed to see. Needed to know how deep the anger ran. She spotted Frank and Jasmine without meaning to. The sight of the girl gripping her notebook like armor, the old Marine with his dog, her pulse hitched. They didn't belong here, not in the line of riot shields forming at the end of the block. The first bottle flew from somewhere in the crowd. It shattered harmlessly on the pavement, but the line of police surged forward as if it had been a grenade. Back up, disperse. Rex barked, bristling. Jasmine stumbled as the crowd shoved back. Frank wrapped a hand around her shoulder, dragging her toward the curb. Stay low, tear gas hissed. White smoke billowed, people coughing and screaming. A woman fell, clutching her child. Frank lunged, hauling her up, shoving her toward an alley. Rex circled back, barking at anyone who came too close. Claire forced her way through the smoke, badge raised, shouting, "She's with me!" as she grabbed Jasmine's arm. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, streaming from the gas. Claire yanked her shirt collar up over her face. For one searing moment, Claire locked eyes with Captain Hayes across the chaos. He stood at the command post, helmet gleaming, expression hard, and she realized he wanted this. He wanted the show of force, the message that dissent would be crushed. Her stomach turned by the time the smoke cleared. The protest was broken. Dozens cuffed, loaded into vans. Blood streaked the courthouse steps. Claire ducked into the alley with Frank, Jasmine, and Rex. The girl clutched her notebook, coughing. Frank wiped sweat and gas from his face. You didn't have to do that, he told Claire. Yes, I did, she said. Because this isn't just about Ortiz, it's about all of you. Frank barked a humorless laugh. Lady, the system chewed me up and spit me out 30 years ago. You think one detective's gonna change that? Claire pulled the printout from her bag, the blurred still of the figure in the stairwell. She shoved it at him. Tell me that's a glitch. Tell me Ortiz just gave up, Frank squinted. That's a man going in, not a man hanging himself. Jasmine leaned closer, whispering, Why don't you show the news? My teacher says proof is power. Claire looked at the girl, then at Frank. Proof without people is nothing. But if people like you are willing to stand, maybe it matters. The next morning, headlines screamed, Violence erupts at Ortiz protest. TV pundits argued whether agitators had started it. Hayes gave a statement, smooth as silk, praising the bravery of his officers against hostile crowds. Claire watched the broadcast in the precinct break room, bile rising in her throat. She knew what she'd seen. Hayes had escalated it. And now, Ortiz's death was being buried beneath smoke and blood. Meanwhile, Frank sat under the bridge, watching the same news on a stranger's portable radio. He muttered, Layers, always liars. Rex pressed against his leg, steady as stone. Jasmine scribbled furiously in her notebook. They don't see us. They don't want to. But we're still here. She tore the page out and taped it to the wall. Under the overpass. A makeshift banner, words jagged and raw. That night, Claire received another text. You want truth? Meet at Pier 7, midnight. Don't bring Hayes. She stared at it, heart pounding. She didn't know if it was bait, a trap, or salvation. She thought of her father, of Ortiz, of the girl's trembling hand gripping her notebook. She thought of Frank's laugh, bitter but alive. And she thought of Rex, the old shepherd who looked at everyone the same with loyalty, without judgment. Maybe the dog was right. Maybe loyalty had to start somewhere. Claire slipped her badge into her pocket and whispered to herself, Midnight then. Outside, the city hummed, restless, ready for another spark. It was raining the next evening, the kind of cold drizzle that slid down collars and soaked into bones. Claire stopped at a diner on her way back from the precinct. On impulse, she ordered 2 extra burgers and a box of fries. She found Frank and Jasmine under the bridge. Rex curled close for warmth. Without a word, she set the bag down between them. Jasmine's eyes widened at the smell of hot food. Frank raised a brow. What's this, detective? Charity? Claire shook her head. Dinner. And don't call me detective right now. Just Claire. They ate in silence at first. Jasmine devoured her fries, eyes darting as if someone might snatch them away. Frank ate slower, hands trembling, muttering, Haven't had beef in months. Rex gnawed happily on the bun. Claire slipped him. Something eased in the air, like walls cracking just enough for warmth to seep through. When the food was gone, Frank leaned back, staring at the wet concrete above. You know what it's like to be invisible, Claire. She hesitated. Sometimes. Cops like Hayes don't want people like me digging too deep. My father died waiting for the VA. Papers in his hand, heart gave out before they called his name. Frank grunted. Figures. He pulled a creased card from his jacket. It was a child's birthday card, glitter smeared, letters crooked. My daughter sent me this 10 years ago. Haven't seen her since. I don't even know if she wants to see me anymore. Jasmine hugged her notebook to her chest. My dad got taken away. ICE. They said he didn't have papers. I keep writing in here so if he ever comes back, I can show him I didn't give up. Silence settled, heavier than the rain. 3 lives, 3 wounds, all bleeding in different ways. Claire finally said, Maybe being invisible is what they want. But we don't have to let them win. Rex shifted, pressing his head against Claire's knee, tail thumping. She scratched behind his ears, and for the first time in years, the old shepherd lifted his muzzle in a soft, grateful howl. Jasmine laughed an actual bright laugh. He likes you. Frank smirked. Rex doesn't like many people. Claire smiled faintly. Maybe he knows we're all strays one way or another. For a moment, the three of them sat there with the dog as their anchor. No detective, no homeless vet, no outcast kid. Just people who needed each other more than they dared admit. The next day, Claire stopped by again, this time in daylight. A group of businessmen walking past sneered. One muttered, "Cop feeding trash now? Guess you're not busy enough." Claire turned on him, eyes sharp. "Careful who you call trash. He wore the uniform before you were born. And she's smarter than any of you will ever give her credit for." The men muttered, moved on. Frank stared at her. "Didn't think you had that in you." "Neither did I," Claire admitted. Jasmine grinned. For the first time, she saw a cop stand for them instead of against them. That night, as they sat together. Again, Claire laid the thumb drive on the ground between them. "This is proof Hayes covered up Ortiz's death. Logs, fragments, enough to blow this wide open. But if I go alone, they'll bury me before the story ever sees daylight." Frank studied her, then Rex, then Jasmine. Finally he said, "Then you're not going alone." Jasmine nodded fiercely. "We're in this too, right, Rex?" The shepherd thumped his tail, eyes bright despite the years out in that moment. A pact form, unspoken but solid. The outcast, the child, the detective, and the dog. A family of circumstance, stitched together by pain, loyalty, and the stubborn refusal to vanish. Midnight. Rain slicked the docks at Pier 7, neon reflections trembling on the black water. Claire Donovan kept her hood up, one hand on the pocket where the thumb drive rested. Every step echoed. Frank Miller and Jasmine Carter waited in the shadows. Rex pressed close to Frank's side. Claire had argued against them coming, but Frank's gravelly voice had been final. "If Hayes is behind this, you don't meet him alone." A figure emerged from the fog, a young officer, nervous, glancing over his shoulder. Marcus, the same one who'd given Claire the thumb drive. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. "They know." Claire's pulse spiked. "Know what?" "That I talked, that you're digging. Hayes isn't just covering a suicide, he's tied into something bigger. Ortiz, he wasn't random. He saw something he wasn't supposed to." Frank stepped forward. "Spit it out, kid." Marcus shook his head. "Not here, if they catch me." A sharp crack split the air. Marcus jerked, eyes wide, before collapsing onto the wet concrete. Blood spread beneath him. Jasmine screamed. Claire dropped to her knees, pressing her hands to the wound, but it was no use. Marcus's lips moved once. "Stairwell, tapes." Then he went still. Rex barked, teeth bared, spinning toward the rooftops. A shadow moved against the glow of streetlights. Then nothing. Claire's hands shook as she pulled away, blood staining her palms. "God damn it." Frank growled low, scanning the fog. This wasn't just a warning. This was a message. They regrouped under the bridge, the rain hammering the freeway above. Jasmine sat hunched, arms around her knees, eyes wide with shock. "He was right there," she whispered. "They just killed him, like he was nothing." Claire's chest ached. She wanted to tell the girl it would be okay, but the lie caught in her throat. They wanted us scared. They wanted us silent. Frank lit a cigarette he'd bummed earlier, hands trembling. "So now what, detective? You still think you can take Hayes down?" Claire wiped Marcus's blood from her palms, voice hoarse. "I don't think. I know, because if I stop now, then Marcus died for nothing. Ortiz died for nothing." Frank studied her, smoke curling from his lips. "Or you end up like them." "Maybe," Claire admitted. "But better me than another kid like Jasmine." At her name, Jasmine looked up. Her eyes glistened, but there was fire in them too. "Then we don't stop." Rex nudged her hand, steady and loyal. The dog's calm was the only anchor in the chaos. For a long moment, the three of them sat in silence, rain pounding. The city roared around them, uncaring. But in that silence, a fragile bond hardened into something else: resolve. The next day, Claire used a backdoor terminal at the library to sift through the files Marcus had given her. Frank and Jasmine sat nearby, pretending to browse old magazines. Rex dozed at their feet. The logs were messy, fragmented, but the pattern was clear. Ortiz hadn't just been a shoplifter. He'd been a part-time janitor at the precinct. And in the week before his arrest, he'd accessed restricted floors that held the evidence locker. Claire's pulse quickened. He saw something. Something that could ruin Hayes. Frank leaned over her shoulder, breath smoky. So Hayes shut him up, Jasmine frowned. But what was it? Claire clipped through corrupted video stills. One image froze her. Hayes in the evidence room, flanked by two officers, crates stacked around them. The crates bore labels she knew too well: narcotic seizures. But instead of being sealed for destruction, they were open. Cash stuffed in duffel bags. Frank swore under his breath. Son of a bitch, he's running his own pipeline. Claire's stomach turned. Hayes wasn't just a dirty cop, he was orchestrating theft, laundering, maybe worse. Ortiz had stumbled onto it, and it had cost him his life, Jasmine whispered. If people saw this, they'd believe you, Claire hesitated. Or Hayes would bury it before it ever hit the light. We need more than fragments. We need the stairwell tapes Marcus mentioned. Proof Ortiz never hung himself. That night, Claire returned to the precinct under pretense of overtime. Her badge still worked, though she knew it might not for long. Frank and Jasmine waited in the car outside, Rex restless in the backseat. You sure about this? Frank muttered. No, Claire said. But it's the only way. Inside, the hall smelled of bleach and stale coffee. Claire's heels echoed as she descended into the archives. Every corner felt like an ambush waiting to happen. She reached the security terminal. Fingers flying, she keyed in Marcus's codes. A list of stored backups flashed across the screen. Her breath caught holding cell west stairwell, 11:55 p.m. She clicked. The screen filled with static, then slowly resolved. Two figures entering the stairwell. One was Ortiz, hands cuffed. The other a uniformed officer. Behind them, another figure followed. Captain Hayes. Claire froze, bile rising. Ortiz struggled, shaking his head. Hayes shoved him hard against the wall. The video glitched, then resumed. Ortiz slumped limp, dragged toward the cell. Claire slammed the export key, downloading to a drive. Her pulse hammered. Proof. Then a voice behind her. Working late, detective? She spun. Has stood in the doorway, smile cold, gun glinting at his side. Claire froze at the sound of Haz's voice. The glow of the monitor cast his face in. Pale light, the raincoat still dripping from outside. He looked calm, too calm, as though catching her here was less accident and more inevitability. Captain, she said, forcing steel into her voice. He stepped closer, boots echoing on the tile. Funny place for overtime, Donovan. You're not supposed to be poking around down here. Her hand drifted subtly toward the USB drive she had just pulled. I'm just reviewing evidence logs. Hayes's chuckle was low, mocking. Evidence? You mean the kind that gets people killed, like Ortiz? Or Marcus? Claire's blood went cold. He knows. You think you're clever, Hayes said, circling the desk like a wolf. But you're in over your head. You've got no allies left. Aya doesn't trust you. The mayor listens to me. And anyone who might have backed you is already 6 feet under. He leaned closer, voice a hiss. You want to be next? Claire clenched her jaw. If you're trying to scare me, you'll have to do better. His smile widened. Who said I was trying? Hayes reached for her arm. Claire swung first, smashing the monitor into his chest. Sparks flew. He staggered back. Cursing. Claire bolted, clutching the drive. Hayes's shout echoed down the hall. "Stop her!" Two uniforms rounded the corner. Claire ducked, sprinting up the stairs, lungs burning. She shoved through a door into the rainy night. Frank's battered sedan idled at the curb, exhaust puffing. In the cold air, Jasmine sat in the back, Rex pacing anxiously. "Go, go, go." Claire shouted as she dove in. Frank slammed the gas. Tires screeched. Headlights flared behind them, Hayes's men giving chase. "Jesus Christ," Frank growled. "What the hell did you do in there?" Claire clutched the drive to her chest. "Got proof." "Enough to bring him down." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Then we won, right?" Claire didn't answer. The patrol cars behind them were closing in. Rain sheeted across the windshield, wipers slapping furiously. Frank swerved down side streets he knew from years of wandering. "Hang on," he barked, as Rex whined and Jasmine gripped the seat. Sirens wailed closer. Blue and red lights reflected off the wet asphalt. Claire twisted to look. "They're not letting us go. Hayes won't risk this getting out." Frank slammed the car onto an off-ramp, engine groaning. "Then we outsmart him." Always was better at hide-and-seek than these rookies. He cut through alleys, over potholes, narrowly missing trash cans. The sedan rattled but held. Finally, after 20 breathless minutes, the sirens faded. Frank pulled under the skeletal remains of an abandoned warehouse, killed the lights. Everyone sat in silence, hearts pounding. Jasmine whispered, "Did we lose them?" Claire nodded, though her stomach twisted. "For now." Inside the warehouse, dripping and shivering, they huddled. Claire set the drive on an overturned crate. "This is it." The stairwell tapes. Hayes caught on video. Frank stared at her. "Then why didn't you turn it in right away? Why run?" "Because if I walked into the precinct with this, I'd never walk out." Jasmine hugged Rex, who rested his muzzle on her lap. She looked between them nervously. Frank lit another cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his worn face. "So, what's the plan, detective? Leak it to the press? March into City Hall? You really think anyone cares what happens to a Mexican janitor who stole razors?" Claire's jaw tightened. "Don't you dare reduce him to that. He died because he saw Hayes's corruption. If people see the truth, they'll care." Frank exhaled smoke, bitter. "You've got more faith in people than I do." The silence stretched. Jasmine fidgeted, finally blurting, "Stop fighting. We're supposed to be on the same side." Her voice cracked, but it was enough to make both adults pause. Rex thumped his tail against the floor, as if agreeing. Hours later, when Frank stepped outside to smoke, Claire glanced at Jasmine's notebook lying open. She hesitated, then read a line scrawled in jagged pencil. "If I disappear like my dad, maybe no one will notice." But Rex noticed, and Claire noticed, and maybe that's enough. Claire's throat tightened. She hadn't realized how much the girl was carrying. She hadn't realized she herself was already becoming part of Jasmine's fragile hope. Frank returned, catching her expression. His eyes narrowed. "Don't pity her. That kid's tougher than either of us. Tougher than she should have to be." "I don't pity her," Claire said softly. "I admire her." For the first time, Frank's gaze softened. He said nothing, but he sat a little closer. By morning, the news cycle had shifted again. The RT's protest was painted as a riot led by outside agitators. Hayes appeared on-screen, clean-shaven and authoritative, promising a thorough investigation while condemning fake rumors spread by fringe elements. Frank spat on the ground. Son of a bitch already rewrote the story. Claire felt the weight of the drive in her pocket. The proof was real, but Hayes's grip on the city was stronger than she feared. If she moved too soon, he'd crush them. Her phone buzzed. Another anonymous text. "They know you have the tape. Trust is a luxury you can't afford. Someone close to you will break." She swallowed hard, glancing at Frank and Jasmine. For the first time, a seed of doubt slipped in. What if Hayes was right? What if one of them? Morning bled gray through the broken windows of the warehouse. Claire spread the documents and the thumb drive on a crate, tracing the outlines of Ortiz's last hours. We leaked this to the press. Independent outlets, first ones Hayes can't buy. Frank rubbed his temples. And when his people come kicking in the door, what happens to the kid then? Jasmine bristled. Stop acting like I'm not here. I can handle it. Claire's jaw clenched. She shouldn't have to handle it. None of this should be on her shoulders. Frank stood, voice rising. Then maybe you should have left her out of it. The silence that followed was sharp. Jasmine hugged Rex, eyes flashing hurt. You don't get it. I've been invisible my whole life. If this is dangerous, at least it means I matter. Frank cursed under his breath, pacing. Claire felt the wedge widening between them, exactly the fracture Hayes would exploit. That night, Claire returned to her apartment briefly to shower and change. When she stepped out of the bathroom, she froze. The files on her table were gone. The thumb drive, panic surged. She tore through drawers, checked under cushions. Nothing. Her phone buzzed. A photo message. The thumb drive, resting in someone else's hand. Caption: Loyalty is a dangerous gamble. Her heart pounded. Someone had betrayed her. Someone close enough to know where she kept the evidence. She thought of Frank's bitterness, his cigarettes in the dark. She thought of Jasmine's burning need to be seen. Doubt coiled like a snake. Claire stormed back to the warehouse, rain dripping from her coat. Which one of you took it? Frank stiffened. Took what? The drive. It's gone. And someone sent me proof they have it. Jasmine's eyes widened. We didn't touch your stuff. Frank glared. You think I stole it, after all this? I don't know, Claire snapped. You've said yourself you don't believe people care about Ortiz. Maybe Hayes made you an offer. Frank's face darkened, veins rising in his neck. Lady, I've been shot at, starved, forgotten by my own damn country. But I've never sold out a man who died for the truth. Jasmine stood between them, trembling. Stop it. You sound just like them. Fighting each other instead of fighting him. Rex barked sharply, the sound echoing through the empty building, cutting through the tension. Claire swallowed hard, shame flooding her chest. Hayes's words echoed in her mind. Someone close will break. Maybe the real betrayal was letting doubt take root. Before they could speak again, a harsh light cut across the warehouse. Engines rumbled outside, the screech of tires. Frank cursed. He found us. Doors burst open. Officers in tactical gear stormed in, rifles raised. Hands up, Claire raised her badge. This is a mistake. A shot cracked overhead. The lead officer sneered. Orders are orders. Captain Hayes says you're resisting arrest. Frank lunged for Jasmine, shoving her behind a stack of crates. Rex snarled, teeth flashing, as the officers closed in. Claire's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned. The only option left was escape. She grabbed the smoke grenade from her belt, standard issue she'd kept stashed, and hurled it to the ground, the warehouse filled with choking haze. Run! She shouted. They spilled into the alley, sprinting through rain. Bullets sparked against brick. Frank half-carried Jasmine, Rex bounding beside them. Claire fired blindly over her shoulder. They ducked into a drainage tunnel, panting in the dark. Water rushed at their feet. Claire's hands shook as she pressed against the wall. He won't stop. Hayes won't stop until we're all in the ground. Frank's voice was hoarse. So what's the play now? Claire didn't answer. Because the drive was gone, the proof with it. And without proof, Hayes's word was law. Jasmine clutched her notebook. Then we make new proof. We don't give up. Her voice was fierce, steady. Stronger than either adult felt in that moment. Claire looked at her, then at Frank. Slowly both nodded. Rex whined softly, pressing his body against Jasmine's legs. His loyalty, unshaken, was the only certainty left. They emerged from the tunnel hours later, soaked, exhausted. The city was quiet again, but Claire knew better. Hayes's net was tightening. As they walked, Claire's phone buzzed one last time. A new message. A video. Her blood froze as she hit play. It showed Marcus, the young officer, before he died. He was strapped to a chair, bruised, bleeding. Hayes's voice off camera. Tell me who else knows. Marcus's broken whisper. Detective Donovan, the vet, the kid. The video ended. Claire's stomach turned to stone. Hayes wasn't just hunting her, he knew all of them. She looked at Frank and Jasmine trudging beside her, unaware of the message yet. Her hands trembled as she locked the phone. For the first time, Claire wondered if she could keep them safe. Or if Hayes was right, that loyalty was a luxury they couldn't afford. The city lights flickered in the distance, beautiful and cruel. Somewhere in the shadows, Hayes was smiling. The drainage tunnel spat them out near the train yard, the sky bleeding purple before dawn. Freight cars loomed like sleeping giants, graffiti scars on their sides. Frank leaned against the wall, coughing hard, his chest rattling. Jasmine clung to Rex's neck, her small frame trembling with exhaustion. Claire scanned the yard. We can't keep running like this. Hayes has every cop in the city looking for us. Frank wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Then we stopped running. We hit back. Claire shook her head. With what? I had the only proof, and it's gone. Jasmine pulled her notebook from her backpack. Then we make new proof. You still have your badge, don't you? People listen when a cop talks. Claire almost laughed, bitter and hollow. Not this cop. Not anymore. Rex barked softly, as if scolding her. His dark eyes glowed with something steady, something that refused to give up. For the first time, Claire wondered if the damn dog had more faith than any of them. They found refuge in an abandoned service shack near the tracks. Claire rigged her phone to an old laptop Frank scavenged, booting up a pirated Wi-Fi signal. She recorded herself, voice trembling but clear. This is Detective Claire Donovan, Internal Affairs. Captain Richard Hayes is covering up the murder of Daniel Ortiz in police custody. We have fragments of surveillance footage. We have a witness who was killed for coming forward. They're hunting us to keep the truth buried. She uploaded it to a small independent news site known for exposing corruption. Fingers shaking, she hit send. Frank muttered, "That's painting a target the size of Texas on your back." Claire looked at him. We already had one. Jasmine watched the upload bar crawl across the screen. When people see this, they'll know, right? Claire didn't answer. She'd played this game long enough to know the city wasn't quick to believe the powerless. But it was a start. The broadcast hit social media within hours. By noon, hashtags began to trend. Hashtag Justice for Ortiz and hashtag Donovan vs. Hayes. Independent journalists demanded answers, but Hayes struck back faster. He called a press conference, flanked by city officials. On every channel, he sneered into the microphones. Detective Donovan has gone rogue. She's suffering from stress, possibly a mental breakdown. She's associating with vagrants and known agitators. The so-called evidence she claims is fabricated. She is now wanted for obstruction of justice and conspiracy. Claire watched from the shack, bile burning her throat. He's turning me into the criminal, Frank spat. Same way they turned every protester into a thug. Same way they turned me into a bum. Jasmine squeezed Rex's collar. But we know the truth. Claire whispered, the truth doesn't matter if no one listens. That night, as they huddled in the shack, Claire's phone buzzed again. A new message, this time with her own face on a grainy still captured from a street camera. Timestamped less than an hour ago. They know where we are, she whispered. Frank stiffened. How the hell? His eyes flicked to Jasmine's backpack. The girl bristled. What? I didn't do anything. But when Claire checked, she found it. A cheap prepaid phone tucked into the side pocket. A tracker, Jasmine's face drained of color. I don't know how that got there, I swear. Frank's eyes narrowed, suspicion dark. Hayes could have slipped it to her at school. Or maybe she— Stop, Claire snapped, louder than she meant. She saw Jasmine's lip tremble, the notebook clutched to her chest like a shield. Hayes wants us to turn on each other, Claire said. Don't give him what he wants. Frank looked away, jaw tight. Rex pressed against Jasmine, steady and loyal, but the damage was done. Doubt had slipped its blade between them, and Hayes had twisted it perfectly just before dawn. The shack exploded in light. Flood lamps. Engines. Hayes's voice booming through a bullhorn. Claire Donovan. Frank Miller, Jasmine Carter, you're surrounded. Step out with your hands up. Frank grabbed a rusted pipe, knuckles white. Figures. Claire pulled her service pistol, heart hammering. We can't fight our way out of this, Jasmine whispered. Then what do we do? Rex growled low, teeth bared at the door. Claire looked at Frank, then at the girl. We buy time. She kicked the back wall, splintering rotten wood. Out now. They scrambled through the gap as the front door caved under battering rams. Bullets cracked. Rex lunged first, barreling through mud. Frank pulled Jasmine close, shielding her with his own body as they fled into the maze of freight cars. Sirens wailed. Hayes shouted orders. The hunt had begun. They ran until their lungs burned, until the roar of engines blurred into the metallic heartbeat of the yard. Freight cars stood shoulder to shoulder like hulking animals in sleep, their iron flanks beaded with rain. Claire's shoes slid on slick gravel. Jasmine stumbled. Frank caught her by the elbow with a soldier's reflex that never quite left. Stay low, he hissed. Keep to the shadows. Rex loped ahead, then back, then ahead again, as if stitching a path through the dark. A searchlight raked the rows. Claire yanked Jasmine behind a stack of pallets as the beam skimmed past, heat hot enough to feel it on her teeth. Somewhere behind them, Hayes's voice lashed the air. Push them north, close off the river gate. I want them boxed. Frank squinted into the grid of tracks and ladders and switch handles. He's hurting us. Then we go where he thinks we won't, Claire said. They slipped between two boxcars. Claire boosted Jasmine up the iron rungs. Then Frank, old joints popping, hoisted himself enough to belly over the footboard and drop inside. Rex leapt. Paws scrambling, and Frank caught his collar with a grunt. Good boy, he whispered. Inside, the boxcar smelled like wet wood and stale grain. Jasmine crouched by the door, arms around Rex's neck. Outside, boots clattered on ballast. Voices, the thud of fists against metal. Clear. Nothing. A hand wrenched their latch. The door shrieked 6 inches. Claire pressed both palms and braced. Frank's shoulder slammed in beside hers. The latch quivered, then fell back into place. The footsteps moved on. They didn't breathe for a count of 30. Rain drummed the roof. Somewhere a horn blew, long and mournful, like a ship lost in fog. Jasmine's whisper barely stirred the dark. He'll find us, not if we move first, Claire said. We can't wait to be discovered. Frank nodded toward a catwalk at the far end. There's a ladder out the back. If we can get to the maintenance line, there's an old office. By the switches, fewer eyes. They slipped out the rear and dropped, one by one, into a trench of shadow. Rex landed light. Claire landed loud, ankle twisting. Pain flared. She swallowed it. The searchlight swept again. Go, Frank said. Now. The old office crouched under a tangle of signal wires, its windows fogged, a yellowed no trespassing sign peeling from the door. Claire tested the knob. Locked. Frank leaned close to the glass and knocked 3 times, quick. For a second. Nothing. Then a chain scraped. The door cracked. A brown eye studied them from the slot. Closed, a voice said. We need 5 minutes, Claire whispered. Please. The eye flicked to Rex, to Jasmine's soaked braids, to Claire's badge half hidden beneath her coat. The door opened just enough for them to slide through. Inside, 2 space heaters hummed. A coffee mug steamed on a desk littered with switch charts. The man was late 40s, compact, a beanie tugged low. His name tag read, Ul Ortiz. He saw Claire see it. His mouth flattened. "You with Hayes?" he asked. "We're the opposite of Hayes," Claire said. He stared, then nodded once. "Then you got 3 minutes." Whole yards crawling. Frank squeezed water from his sleeve. "You related to Daniel?" The man's jaw tightened. "Cousin." "A beat. We were kids together. He taught me to pick cilantro straight. He wasn't a suicide." Jasmine pushed her notebook toward him with both hands, as if it weighed more than it did. "We're trying to prove that." He looked at the notebook, then at her face. Something shifted in his eyes. He jerked his chin toward a dusty bank of monitors. "My cameras don't see the cells. But they see cops. They saw them come in hot. Tonight, Hayes doesn't run a warrant. He runs a hunt." Claire leaned over the screens, black and white slices of yard. Trucks idled behind a row of reefers. A cluster of officers moved grid-like through the maze, methodical and quick. On one feed, Hayes stood near a flood lamp, bullhorn slack at his side, face alert and oddly calm, like a man already certain of the ending. "Give me your phone," Ortiz said. Claire handed it over. He plugged it into an ancient keyboard, typed. With 2 fingers. "There, that'll kill any standard ping he's using through the city's network. Not the fancy stuff, but it'll buy you a little time." "Why help us?" Frank asked. Ortiz stared at a knot in the deskwood. "Because they put my cousin in a hole and told us not to ask questions. Because I still got breath and he doesn't." He glanced at Rex. "And because that dog's got better manners than most men I meet on this shift." Voices swelled outside the office. "Boots on the stairs. Go," Ortiz said, already moving to the door. "South ladder, 2 flights down. Then the drain under track 12. The great Styx kick it left. I never told you that." Claire grabbed his arm. "He'll come for you if he knows you helped." Ortiz shrugged. "He already came for my family. This is just making it honest." They slipped out the back. Ortiz turned the deadbolt just as fists pounded the front. Through the glass, Claire caught one last glimpse of him, shoulders squared, chin lifted. As he pulled a switch list over the monitors like a curtain, they reached track 12 in a crouching run, coach lights flickering beyond the fence like a cheap constellation. The grate groaned under Claire's boot. It stuck, then wrenched, grinding metal on metal. They slid into the wet culvert. The rain had built a thin rush there, enough to soak them to the bone. Rex waited, steady as a tugboat halfway down the channel, a flashlight knifed the dark. "There!" Shot pinged off the grate, ricocheting sparks. Frank shoved Jasmine into a hollow in the concrete. "Stay," he barked, voice that old command-tone soldiers get drilled into their throats. He turned, put himself between her and the light. "Frank," Claire warned, but the beam was moving, fast. A young officer came into view at the lip, breath smoking. The muzzle dipped, then rose, uncertain. He couldn't be older than 22. Rain streaked his cheeks like tears. "Don't," Claire said, hands out, palms open. "Think about your mother watching this on the news." "Orders," he choked. Captain says a lot of things," Frank rasped. "That doesn't make them right." The kid flinched, finger tightening, the way a finger tightens when a person decides to cross a line he can't uncross. Rex moved first, a blur of muscle, launching up the incline with a snarl that vibrated the concrete. The gun barked. "Rex!" Yelped, spun, slid back down in a hot spray. Jasmine screamed. The kid stumbled, horrified at what he'd done. Claire lunged, slammed him off balance, sent the gun clattering into the channel. It hissed in the water, dead metal. The kid stared at his empty hand as if it had betrayed him. Frank was already on his knees in the stream, pulling Rex to his chest, hands skimming fur for the wound. Blood pulsed from a furrow along the dog's shoulder, not deep, thank God, not deep. A graze. Rex's eyes were wide and insulted, ears back, but he licked Frank's wrist, as if apologizing for worrying him. "It's okay," Frank told him, voice so soft it shook. "You're okay, buddy. You're okay." Claire pressed the kid against the wall with her forearm. "Listen to me," she said, voice low and fierce. "You walk away now and you can tell yourself you missed them in the dark. You pull that trigger again and you'll aim at that child. Is that the story you want to live with when you try to sleep?" His throat bobbed. Somewhere beyond the fence, Hayes's bullhorn barked orders. The kid's eyes darted toward the sound. Then he sagged. "I didn't see you," he whispered. "Good," Claire said, and let him go. He scrambled up, vanished into the rain. Jasmine pressed both palms to Rex's head, breath misfiring in shallow bursts. "Don't you dare," she said to the dog. "You promised me you were magic." Rex thumped his tail, a wet, brave sound in the dark. Frank wrapped his tattered bandana around the wound, tied it off with hands that barely shook. "Move," he said, voice back to that hard steel. "Before the next one isn't a kid." The culvert spat them into a thicket of weeds by the fence line. Beyond, a service road ran along the river, slick with oil and rainbows. A barge horn moaned. The phone in Claire's pocket buzzed again. Her gut nodded, expecting another taunt from Hayes, but it was a notification from the indie outlet. She'd pinned that morning. "We saw your video. We'll go live if you can join. We need audio from Hayes, anything. Can you speak on record now?" Claire stared at the screen, then at the fence, the trucks, the roaming lights. She heard again the way Hayes had said orders are orders, the way he'd rolled Marcus in his mouth like a gnat to spit. "Frank," she said, "if we can get him to speak within range, if the media hears him in real time, he can't bury it before it spreads." "You want to bait him," Frank said. "I want to let him be who he is," Claire said. "And I want the city to hear it." Jasmine wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. "How?" Claire's fingers were already moving. She opened the outlet's link. The reporter popped into a tiny frame, young, sharp-eyed, wind whipping her hair. "Detective Donovan? We're rolling on a 30-second delay. Are you safe?" "Not remotely," Claire said. "Can you patch in any audio I feed you?" "Anything with a mic," the reporter said. "What do you have?" "Hayes," Claire said, and killed her camera so the reporter wouldn't see the fear that sprinted through her just then. She dug into her pocket, pulled a small lapel mic she'd clipped to her coat hours earlier out of habit. She paired it to her phone, set it to broadcast, then nudged Frank. "We get closer. Not too close. Just enough for the bullhorn." Frank looked at Jasmine. "We take her?" "No," Claire said, and her voice surprised even her. "She and Rex stay with me. You draw him." Frank's brows shot up. "That's not the division of labor I expected. You're quieter on your feet than people think, and you know this terrain. You make him move his pieces where we need them," she said, the plan forming even as her heart skittered. "I'll get the mic in range." Jasmine grabbed Frank's sleeve. "Don't be dumb." "I do my best work, dumb," Frank said, managed a smile that made the years drop from his face, then slid into the brush, a ghost again. They worked the edge, leapfrogging shadows. Frank tossed a bolt across a row. It clanged, bright and clear. Officers peeled toward the sound. Hayes shifted with them, a general on a chessboard. "South line," he barked. "They're trying the river." "Keep talking," Claire whispered into the rain, as if Hayes could hear her. "Keep talking." Jasmine held Rex's collar, eyes on Claire's phone where the live feed clock spun. The reporter's voice was a whisper in Claire's earbud. "We're hearing him. Faint, but we're hearing him. Can you get closer?" Claire slid forward. On her belly under a flat car, mud soaking her coat. The bullhorn boomed, Closer now, Hayes's words snapping crisp as fresh bills. "Donovan, you think a camera will save you? You think anyone cares about some dead thief?" He laughed, and Claire's vision went white around the edges. "End this now and maybe I let the kid go home." The reporter's whisper cut in. "Electric, we got that, we got that." Frank darted to the far side of the stack and whistled, a sound as old as fox hunts. Hayes pivoted toward it. His guards followed, almost. Claire breathed, almost. She wormed another car length. Hayes stood framed by the floodlight now, rain stitching lines through his shadow. His bullhorn gleamed. "This is your last chance," he called. "You get to choose, Donovan. Your career? Or your little charity cases?" Claire raised the phone, mic catching every syllable. In her ear, the reporter said, "We're live. Every station that hates Hayes is mirroring." Jasmine looked at Claire, mouth a thin line. "He thinks we're charity." Claire met her small, burning eyes. "He thinks wrong." The beam swung. An officer spotted motion Frank's heel disappearing. Behind a wheel. "There!" He yelled, and a line surged. "Now!" Claire hissed. Frank bolted. Not away from them, but across their line of sight, drawing them with him. Hayes lunged into the gap he left, exactly where Claire needed him. She stood up into the light. Hayes froze, recognition flared, then something uglier. "You never learn. On the contrary," Claire said, voice steady. "I finally learned exactly who you are." Behind her, Jasmine rose too, small and fierce. Rex leaned into her leg, bandana dark with rain and blood and stubborn life. "Put the gun down, Donovan." "I don't have to," she said, and smiled a smile that felt like breaking a chain. "The city already heard you." It happened fast. After that, Hayes's face flickered from certainty to calculation to something like fear. He looked at the officers flanking him, at their cameras, at the phones held by bystanders who had crept up along the fence to watch. He understood. Get them, he snarled anyway, and the line stepped just as a horn detonated right in their ears. A locomotive, dead for years, coughed awake on a track Frank had somehow coaxed power into. Its light blasting the darkness. Men flinched, instinctive. In that blink, Frank grabbed a flare from a rust bucket and raked it across rail grease. It whooshed into a wall of harmless fire, bright and theatrical. The line fell back. Chaos bit its own tail. "Go!" Claire shouted. They ran, not away now but through the only hole the chaos had left. Jasmine's hand tucked in Claire's, Rex lunging, Frank limping hard. One hand pressed to his side where a long-forgotten rib complained with every step. Boots pounded. Someone fired. The bullet sang past Claire's ear like a furious bee. She dove behind the stack, Jasmine under her. When she looked back, Frank wasn't there. "Frank!" She screamed. He had turned just for a second, to hurl the flare at the feet of the closest officer, to buy them one heartbeat more. In that second, a baton found his knee. He buckled. Rex wheeled, pain forgotten, put his body between Frank and the next blow with a snarl that was all old thunder. Claire's body moved before thought. She was on the officer, wrenching the baton away, elbow up, brutal and precise. He went down, her hands shook. It had been years since she'd aimed to break rather than restrain. The choice felt terrible and necessary. Frank staggered up, face gray. "I'm good," he lied. "You're not," Claire said. "Don't argue." With a Marine, he shot back and grinned a bloody grin that made Jasmine laugh through tears. Sirens again. More men. Too many. Frank glanced at the river, then at Claire's phone. "You got what you needed?" She nodded. The feed's chat had gone feral. Thousands of eyes. Tens of thousands. Chewing Hayes's threats. Spitting them into every corner of the city. "Then the rest is noise," he said, and pointed to the dark where the service road dove under the highway. "That's your way out. What about you?" Jasmine asked, voice small. Frank's hand found the top of her head, brief and rough and so gentle it hurt. "I'll be right behind you." He wasn't lying, he wanted to be. But even as he said it, Claire saw him measure the distance, the time, the shape of the hunt. She saw him choose. "Don't," she said. "Somebody's got to slow him." He said, "Guess it's my turn again." Rex looked between them, whined. Frank scratched his ear. "Guard your girls." Rex whined again, louder, as if arguing. Then he leaned hard into Frank's leg, one last insistence of loyalty, and turned back to Jasmine like he'd understood the order. "Go," Frank said. The girls' fingers found Claire's. Claire's found steel. They ran. Behind them, Frank's voice rose, raw and joyful and furious. A battle cry dragged across decades and spit back into a rainy American night. The hunt turned toward him. The yard flared brighter. Claire didn't look back. If she did, she would stop. If she stopped, none of this would matter. She ran until the service road swallowed them and the river's breath cooled her face, and the city beyond began, at last, to listen. Frank crouched behind a coupler, chest heaving. Rain plastered his hair to his skull. His knee screamed, but he forced it still, pressed his palm against the cold steel. Let the iron hold him steady. He could hear Hayes's voice cutting through the storm, sharp, commanding, the kind of voice that used to mean rescue in another life. Now it meant the opposite. "Fan out. Donovan's running south with the kid. She's mine." "But the old man?" Hayes's tone darkened. "The old man's expendable." Frank smiled without humor. "Figures." He checked the length of rebar in his fist. Not much, not enough. But he'd been fighting outnumbered since Kisan, and some habits don't die. Boots splashed closer. Shadows broke against the floodlight glow. Young officers, scared eyes, trembling hands. Frank stepped out. Just like that, no warning, no disguise. The rain carved a halo around his head. He slammed the rebar on the track. The clang cracked the air. "You want me?" His voice was raw gravel. "Here I am," the line faltered. These weren't soldiers. They were kids with badges told to fear the man in front of them, but never prepared for what that man had lived through. "Drop it," one yelled. His hands shook. Frank barked a laugh. "This? Hell, son, I've killed with less." The kid flinched. Another stepped forward, steadier. But then Hayes himself strode into the light, rain dripping off his cap, eyes glittering. "Well," Hayes said, bullhorn dangling at his side, the drunk war hero. "Should have died 20 years ago." Frank spat, blood-tinged rain. "Sorry to disappoint." Hayes stepped closer. "Where's Donovan?" Frank grinned, teeth pink. "Far enough you'll never touch her." Hayes's jaw ticked. He motioned to his men. "Take him." They surged. Frank swung, a wide arc that cracked a baton aside. A knee met a gut. A fist met a jaw. He was fire in the rain, ugly and fierce, every scar a memory and every strike a prayer. They swarmed him, but he held, a wall of rage and loyalty, until the weight was too much. Until the years came crashing back. Hayes waited until Frank sagged, rebar slipping from his fingers, knees in the mud. Then he stepped in, slow, savoring. "You should have stayed forgotten," Hayes said. He raised his pistol. Frank lifted his head, eyes bright with something unbroken. "Yeah? Well, remember this." And he laughed loud, wild, echoing through the yard. So when the shot cracked, it wasn't silence that followed, but the sound of defiance carved into rain. Claire felt it. Not the shot itself, but the way the night seemed to fold around it. Her gut twisted, like someone had ripped a piece out of her rib cage. Jasmine stumbled beside her. "Was that?" "Don't," Claire rasped. She couldn't, not yet. If she named it, it was real. They tore through the service road. Rex limping but determined. Head low, ears flat against the storm. The river stank of diesel and old rain. Barges moved like shadows, their horns groaning. Claire saw it, the underpass that could spit them into the city. Safety wasn't guaranteed, but it was distance. It was a chance. Behind them, floodlights surged, shouts, engines. The hunt was closing. "Come on," Claire gasped, pushing Jasmine ahead, every muscle screaming. They ducked into the underpass. Concrete dripping, the roar of traffic above. Rex growled, the sound vibrating the narrow tunnel. Then Hayes' voice boomed again, closer than she thought possible. "Donovan, you think you're a hero? You're a traitor. You're nothing. The city belongs to men like me." Claire shoved Jasmine behind a pillar, pressed her back against cold stone, pulled her pistol. Her phone still streamed. The lapel. Mike still caught everything. She shouted back, her voice a whip. "The city doesn't belong to you. It belongs to every person you tried to silence. And tonight they heard you." Hayes stepped into the tunnel mouth, drenched, pistol raised. Behind him, half his men hesitated, phones in their hands. They'd heard too. They knew. "Put it down, Donovan." Hayes barked. "No," she said. And she didn't. The standoff stretched thin, like glass about to shatter. Rain hammered the pavement. Jasmine clung to Rex, both shaking, both watching. Claire with wide, terrified eyes. Hayes' finger twitched on the trigger. And then from above, the groan of steel. A truck had jackknifed on the slick bridge, its trailer teetering against the guardrail. Sirens wailed. Concrete shuddered. Claire felt it the second before collapse. She grabbed Jasmine, shoved her deeper into the tunnel. "Run!" the guardrail gave. The trailer plunged, smashing onto the roadbed. Metal screamed. Dust and rain exploded into the underpass. Hayes staggered, pinned for a heartbeat by falling debris. Claire didn't waste it. She hauled Jasmine and Rex through the far side of the tunnel, lungs burning, ears ringing. Behind her, she thought she heard Hayes roar. Thought she saw his silhouette, framed in fire and wreckage, still coming. But maybe it was just her mind, refusing to believe monsters ever truly die. Hours later, they crouched in the basement of a shuttered laundromat, city sirens still wailing somewhere distant. Claire's phone buzzed nonstop, thousands of notifications. Her face was everywhere now, spliced against Hayes' words, his threats, his sneer. Independent outlets had picked it up, then mainstream, then national. She scrolled, numb. Headlines. Screened corrupt captain exposed. Whistleblower detective on the run. Hashtags for Frank had begun. Someone had filmed the yard. His last stand, his laugh before the shot. It was already viral. Jasmine sat curled against Rex, asleep at last, the dog's heavy head across her lap. His bandana was soaked through with blood and rain, but he breathed steady. Claire stared at them, heartbreaking and healing in the same breath. Frank was gone. Hayes was wounded but not finished. The city was awake but not safe. This wasn't victory. Not yet, but it was the spark. And sometimes sparks lit fires that no rain could put out. The rain had stopped by dawn, but the city didn't breathe easier. Helicopters carved the sky, their searchlights combing rooftops and alleys. Police scanners buzzed with chaos, half the voices contradicting the other half. In the basement laundromat, Claire woke with her back against cold concrete, Rex's head pressed against her thigh, Jasmine curled beneath her jacket. The girl's hair stuck to her cheeks in tangled curls. Claire blinked at her phone. The battery was low, but not before she saw it. Her face on every platform, every feed. Grainy footage of Hayes screaming threats into her lapel mic. Viral clips of Frank's last stand, his laugh, his defiance reshared with hashtags that burned like wildfire. Hashtag justice for Frank. Hashtag exposed blue. Claire shut her eyes. "We did it, Frank," she whispered. "But God, I wish you were here." Rex whined low as if answering. His eyes, one cloudy, one still sharp, watched her with the kind of loyalty that broke her more than anything else. By midday, the city had changed. Crowds surged in front of precincts, some holding candles, others holding signs scrawled with anger. Who's protecting us from them? And Hayes killed Frank. Veterans gathered too, men and women with weathered jackets and missing limbs, standing shoulder to shoulder in silent protest. At their feet, dogs sat retired K-9 South, rescues, strays wearing scarves painted with Frank's name. The poor, the homeless, the forgotten, they came too. People who never had a voice suddenly found one, shouting into cameras, telling stories no one had asked for before. Stories of abuse, of humiliation, of being pushed aside because of skin, or poverty, or silence. And in the middle of it all, kids like Jasmine held handmade signs that read, "I deserve to live." The city had been cracked open, and nothing Hayes did could tape it shut again. But Hayes wasn't gone. In a secured townhouse on the riverfront, he sat with his arm bandaged, rage boiling hotter than the whiskey in his glass. His loyalists, half a dozen men who still believed. Rank meant truth clustered around him. "They're painting you as a monster," one said, scrolling on his phone. "It's everywhere. They're calling Frank a martyr." Hayes's jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Frank was a drunk who didn't know when to stay down. "He's a symbol now," another muttered. Hayes slammed his fist on the table. "Symbols burn, and so do the people who worship them." He leaned forward, voice low. "Find Donovan, find the kid. And when you do, bring me their heads." For the first time, some of the men hesitated. They'd heard the tapes. They'd seen the footage. Loyalty was a brittle thing when truth hit daylight. Hayes noticed. His eyes narrowed. "If any of you think of crossing me, remember, the city runs on fear. And no one fears Donovan more than me." That night, Claire and Jasmine moved again, slipping through safe houses like ghosts. Friends in the department whispered warnings. Arrest warrants were being drafted. Hayes's allies still held power in the city council. Claire sat on a sagging couch, head in her hands. Her phone buzzed constantly, journalists begging for interviews, activists begging for leadership, strangers sending threats and praise in equal measure. Jasmine touched her arm. "Are we safe here?" Claire forced a smile. "Safe enough for tonight." Rex lifted his head, ears twitching. The old dog didn't sleep much anymore. Neither did Claire. She wanted to collapse. To cry. To scream that she was just one detective who hadn't meant to become the face of a movement. But Frank's laugh echoed in her skull, daring her to keep standing. "You're not just fighting for yourself anymore," she whispered to her reflection in the cracked mirror. "You're fighting for him. For her. For everyone they tried to bury." 3 nights later, it began. The largest protest the city had ever seen clogged the main boulevard. Thousands of bodies, chanting, singing, shouting. Banners of Frank's face waved in the wind. Drones filmed from above. Every step was live streamed. Claire stood at the edge with Jasmine and Rex, who'd pulled low. She shouldn't have been there, it was too dangerous, but she couldn't stay away. A preacher thundered into a microphone about truth. A veteran recited Frank's name like a roll call. Kids held candles that flickered against the night. Then police lines appeared, shields, batons, tear gas launchers. And at the center, Hayes' face bruised, arms strapped, but eyes burning with fury. The crowd roared louder. Phones rose higher. Claire's chest tightened. She knew this was it. The night everything broke or healed. Hayes raised his bullhorn, but the booze drowned him out. He tried again, voice cutting. "This ends tonight. Go home, or we'll clear the streets." A chorus answered. "Whose streets?" "Our streets," tear gas hissed. People screamed. But then, something shifted. Dozens of officers lowered their shields. One by one, they stepped back, refusing orders. The crowd erupted. Hayes spun, shouting at them, veins bulging. "You cowards! You follow me, or you're nothing." And then through the smoke Claire stepped forward, hood down, face bare. The world seemed to freeze, cameras swung to her. Even Hayes's men faltered. "It's over, Captain," she shouted, voice hoarse but steady. "Everyone heard you. Everyone saw. You can't bury the truth anymore. Hayes raised his gun. Rex growled, low and deep. Jasmine clung to his fur, eyes wide. Claire didn't flinch. If you shoot me, the whole world watches you pull the trigger. You'll never kill the truth, Hayes. Not now. Not ever. For the first time, Hayes's hand trembled. Not much, but enough that the crowd surged forward, chanting Frank's name. Phones lit the night like stars. Hayes's men pulled back, some dropping. Their gear entirely. Hayes staggered, surrounded not by enemies, but by truth. His power dissolved in real time, like ink and rain. He screamed once raw, furious, but it was swallowed by the roar of thousands. When the cuffs finally clicked around his wrists, it wasn't cops who did it. It was his own men, faces grim. Done carrying his sins, the city erupted in cheers. Jasmine cried into Rex's fur. Claire just stood still, shaking, tears mixing with the last of the rain. Days later, murals bloomed across the city. Frank's face, Rex's silhouette, Jasmine's small hand holding a candle. Hayes sat behind bars, awaiting trial. His empire of fear crumbled under testimony after testimony. Claire walked the streets, no longer hunted but still uneasy. She wasn't a hero. She was just a woman who hadn't turned away. Rex limped beside her, Jasmine skipping at her other side. They stopped at a wall painted with Frank's laugh, captured forever in spray paint. Claire touched the brick. You were right, old man. Sometimes laughter scares them more than bullets. Jasmine slipped her hand into hers. You think people will remember him? Claire smiled, soft and sad. They already do. Above them, the city hummed broken. Scarred, but awake. And in that hum lived a promise. The fight wasn't over. It never was, but at least for tonight, the light was winning. In the end, Captain Hayes was dragged away in cuffs, his empire of fear collapsing under the weight of truth. Frank's laughter became a mural on city walls, Jasmine's courage a spark for thousands, and Rex the old K9 stood as proof that loyalty outlives even the darkest betrayals. This story isn't about a perfect victory. It's about scars that stay, wounds that ache, but also the hope that rises when ordinary people refuse to stay silent. And maybe that's the message Frank left us, that courage doesn't always look like strength. It sometimes looks like standing when every bone in you wants to fall. If this story stayed with you, let it be a reminder to stand for the ones who can't. And if you want to keep hearing the truths they don't want you to know, subscribe now, because together, we'll keep the light alive.